Good evening, everyone. Hi. Wow, that was like a whiplash of heads. Hi, everyone. Oh, everybody's waving. Hi. Hi, and we're waving to you at home. We should say this is one of the issues and ales where there are folks from home. So hi, everyone at home, too, including, I think, my mom. So hi, Mom. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I think I tweeted or X'd earlier yesterday something about what a year in politics the past month has been. How's everybody doing? Yeah? Okay, if I had asked that, I don't know, like 36 days ago, how would everyone have been doing? Well, that's an interesting dynamic, isn't it? It's so lovely to be here with everyone tonight. We're also super excited to let folks here in this room and those at home know we're starting a newsletter because your email inboxes apparently are not full enough, but it's going to be different because it's me and Rick, so it's going to be different. So every Friday in your inboxes, the new It's Just Politics newsletter is starting this Friday. I know. We're super excited about it, and it is going to be voices from folks like Andrea Bitely, who didn't know that her voice is going to be in it, like Adrian.
Right here in the first row.
And John Sellek, folks who are going to help you really understand what's happening in this crazy Capitol, right? You can get news headlines everywhere, but one of the things that we really pride ourselves on, and it's just politics, as Rick used to say, is we talk about Lansing the way people in Lansing talk about Lansing, and we want to kind of pull that back for you. Without the cursing. But no, on the FCC in public radio without the cursing, but we haven't had that discussion about the newsletter.
I'm in.
Okay. So there are QR codes on your table where you can sign up. Also, if you go to michiganpublic.org, a little amazing pop-up comes up too for those folks who are at home. So with that, I want to introduce our illustrious panel this evening. On my far left, not politically speaking, is, do you want to introduce yourself, Rick Pluta?
My name is Rick Pluta. I am the senior Capitol correspondent for the Michigan Public Radio Network. I'm also here with her.
And the co-host of It's Just Politics, and also happens to be my husband. We have John Sellek, who's like texting right now on his phone.
No, I was the first person to sign up for the newsletter.
Did you really just sign up? Okay, John Sellek, introduce yourself.
I am John Sellek. I like to partner up here with my Democrat friend who's going to be introduced next. We like to think we can talk about politics in a sane way. We come from different political backgrounds. We secretly hate each other, but in public, we put on a nice show.
John.
Adrian, take off your hat and tell them what you call your podcast.
Baldly bipartisan.
John has worked in Republican politics for decades here in Michigan, and so has a wealth of knowledge that we're excited to jump into. And Adrian, introduce yourself.
I'm Adrian Hemond. I'm CEO of Grassroots Midwest. I do this baldly bipartisan dog and pony show with John, and some people still see fit to call me a Democrat. We'll let you be the judge of that by the end of the evening.
And as Adrian said, he has also worked in Democratic politics for decades here in Michigan. But what I love about both these two is they cut through the BS, right? And so one may be a Republican, one may be a Democrat, but both of them will come at it with facts and the truth, which we kind of love at Michigan Public. We kind of believe in that kind of thing.
She's set expectations here for you guys.
So I have three really important questions off the bat, and these are tough. Like, these are digging into where everything is at today. Are you guys ready?
All right.
Okay. John, I want to start with you. What is Brat Summer?
I think we're living it in this room right now. This is us. Let's go.
Okay, but what is it?
Look, it's when you're super cool and you don't give a shit what anyone else thinks.
So who here is having a Brat Summer? I hope this is the first public radio audience that's been asked if they're having a Brat Summer. Adrian, why is everyone suddenly using the word weird?
I'm glad you asked me this because I've been on a personal crusade for like the last 2 years, just telling politicians, political activists, people who consume too much politics on the internet to stop being weird, because most people don't live like that. And now that's just the reality that we're living in, is that like weird is the word of the day.
Okay, but
You have the entire Democratic establishment repeating your talking points right now.
Which is weird because most of them despise me. It's very, very confusing.
should we play some kind of drinking game? And it can be a mocktail or not, that every time someone says weird tonight, it's, you know, and I'm having club soda, so this is alcohol or not. But, okay, Rick Pluta, what is a vibe election?
This one.
You and John with your like, ugh,
Yeah.
define.
Well, actually, it kind of goes along with this whole weird dynamic, which is that it's not so much, you know, the issues as they're there and they matter, but it's also how people are feeling about things. I mean, part of it was Joe Biden's miserable debate performance, and it made people feel down, and then all of a sudden Kamala Harris is in, and that changed the vibe. There's a new vibe. That was a little bit of what Donald Trump's running mate, J.D. Vance, was supposed to bring to the Republican ticket as well, but now Democrats are trying to sort of turn on that and making his vibe the weird vibe.
I think that's actually the best question you've had so far, because every radio interview I do, I write down vibes election on the top of my notepad, and there couldn't be any better example. The most eye-opening thing to me was, yeah, we understood that Biden's poll numbers were depressed, and all these groups that typically voted Democrat, people were not, when you asked them in polls how excited you were if you were a D or an R, the Ds were way below. The explosion of positivity on the Democrat side really just shows us how unbelievably depressed the Democrats were. I mean, Harris is benefiting from a massive outpouring of excitement that doesn't necessarily have a whole lot to do with her. The hate for Biden, who's now just flying on Air Force One, talking to his friends, watching sports, and nobody knows where he is or cares, is crazy. So that level of outpouring of excitement, that sugar high that everyone's talking about, kind of question of like, how long does that last? Do they stretch that into the VP pick? But it's a huge advantage for Harris that she personally didn't even have to do anything to get. It's her job to keep it.
Yeah, I mean, she has the great advantage of not having been born in the 50s, which Americans have been pretty clear for the last 2 years in public opinion polls that they really, really did not want their next president to be someone who was born in the 1950s, and she wasn't. And that's still going to be true on election day. So she definitely has that going for her, which seems to meet the vibe of this election, as Rick put it.
But I'm not trying to take anything away from her. If there was a person that was the right person to meet the moment for the Democrats in this first 2 weeks after this happened, it's her, because she has that brat attitude. She's got the swagger when she walks up to the podium. That's what that crowd is like. Oh my God, we finally have a chance. And she meets that moment for them.
Yeah, I mean, well, speaking of polling, one of the things that we saw when it came to the Democratic ticket was there was interest in voting for someone other than Donald Trump, who, by the way, remember, in Michigan, in either of his elections, never topped 50%. That he has never won the state of Michigan outright. And that gives Democrats some hope that, you know, this guy can be beaten in Michigan. But with Biden, all you had was this sort of unmet potential that people just weren't signing on board. And now with Kamala Harris at the top of the ticket, that is a possibility. The question being, someone said sugar high, whether this is just a surge of enthusiasm that will then ebb, or whether or not Democrats can turn this into something with lasting impact.
So this is why I love having John and Adrian on the panel, because they've run elections like this. And so I think the question then is, how do you fuel that to continue for the next 96 days until the election? So it isn't just a peak. I mean, I think we can probably assume that the Harris campaign isn't going to continue week after week raising $200 million from 67% of folks who have never donated in this election yet, right? But how do you make sure, if you're the Democratic side, that the momentum continues? And then I want to hear what the Republicans are going to do.
Sure. So the first thing that Democrats need to do is some of what you saw earlier today, by which I mean platforming Donald Trump. Because you'll get more performances like you got from Donald Trump today in front of the NABJ, where he was saying dangerously insane and racist stuff. And one of the things that was hurting Joe Biden, obviously the most important one was that he was very old and tired. But one of the other things that was hurting Joe Biden is that we weren't seeing nearly as much of Donald Trump because he's not the president, and the media was covering the president, who was very old and tired and very clearly not ready to run for re-election and then serve out another 4-year term. So there was a lot of reporting about that. The more that you put Donald Trump in front of TV cameras, especially in situations where he has to answer questions from journalists instead of lackeys, the more dangerously insane and racist things he will say that will turn off independents and keep Democratic enthusiasm high.
So really, I mean, it's more of both candidates. For the Democrats, it's more Harris getting out in rallies, and it's more Trump.
Yes, our candidate is 59 years old, and your candidate is in his late 70s and says dangerously insane and racist stuff all the time. Up to you, America.
So I'm going to counter that a little, and then I want to hear from you, John, which is someone said today after the NABJ, which is the National Association of Black Journalists. It's happening in Chicago. It's a conference right now, which is right, but this is what happened in 2015 and 16, is that he kept saying dangerous, some might argue, deranged, some might argue things, and he won.
Well, I mean, one of the things is it seems like every week, every other week, there's been a new fantastical twist in this campaign. And I mean, remember.
You know why it feels that way?
Remember, we went from, the Biden drama, we went to a former president of the United States getting seemingly within a couple of centimeters of being shot, and then all of a sudden everyone was talking about the Biden drama as that ticket collapsed, whether he was going to go, if he would go. He finally agrees to go, and he does. Kamala Harris emerges as the nominee after a little bit of drama surrounding that, and who knows what's coming next? I mean, even the speech today before the National Association of Black Journalists was another bizarre twist in this campaign. This was supposed to be where Donald Trump showed up at a meeting where he was going to charm and cajole black journalists into, I guess, showing some more positive interest in his campaign. And he shows up and belittles and blasts and complains about the people that he's supposed to be there to charm. And so now that's the new narrative of today.
John.
That's not fair.
Welcome to life, baby.
I think, actually, I joke. Everybody will pay Adrian and I to go around, except for these two. We're just doing it for beer, to explain why the other side does what it does. And there are severe negatives on both sides of what they do, but they speak in America more often than not different languages. And the other side is like, oh, that was terrible, that was stupid. Whatever, make your list, right? I think that Trump believes there's no way he was going to get any of those reporters to ever do anything nice or interesting for him. He's trying to talk through their networks to the same black males that he was pulling away from Joe Biden before Joe Biden pulled away from us, right? So he's still doing that, and he's doing it in the most base way that he does. He's very real talk. He's like, all right, he literally is questioning which race she is or which ethnicity she is, and you can tell he's just trying to say she's not really black. That's what he was doing today. That message doesn't work for the people in that room or this one, but there's other people in cities that they're trying to recruit voters from that hear that. A couple other examples of that real quick. We joked about Brat to start this thing off. The meme of Kamala Harris and the coconut tree. I mean, honest to God, the first time I saw it, I'm like, what in the heck is that? what is she talking about? And we are presented on X with constant streams of videos of her cackling and laughing and almost no other words. So you start to think, wow, is she there? Like, is she all that smart? Then you listen to it a little bit longer and you start to see she's giving like motherly advice about context. But a whole bunch of people will never understand that. They'll just go, there's no such thing as a coconut tree. What the hell is she talking about, right? The same thing goes for Trump. He's getting obliterated the last several days because he was at a national Christian conference and he said the words that caused January 6th to come back into a lot of people's minds. You won't have to vote anymore. So every single story, I went and looked through him because I already knew what he was talking about. Every single story, the reporters went and found people who work to defend democracy, and their first answer is, this guy's crazy, he wants to be a dictator. But if you listen carefully to what he's saying over and over again, well, I did, he knows that Christian coalition voters that are a huge part of his base, evangelical Christians, they don't want to vote. They think politics is dirty and nasty, and guess what? They're right. And they argue inside their own circles about whether they should be involved, whether they should register to vote. He flat out said to them in his most base way, I know you hate voting. It really sucks. Just come out one more time for me, and then you never have to think about it again. He's not, I don't believe that's the message he was sending. He's terrible at explaining what he's saying, and the other side, who's already disposed to not want to hear what he's saying, then questions, well, what was he talking about? It must have been terrible, but I think that's what he was doing. The problem is it hurts him with people in the middle he's trying to pull in because they don't get it, and the way those words get filtered through certain media, it's I'm not going to use that word. It went in the wrong direction.
Yeah, and I think it backfired in a couple of ways. It certainly didn't help him with the journalists in the room there. I don't think it helped him with independents. And the Trump campaign was getting some traction going with black male voters and Hispanic male voters. That missed the mark with black voters of either sex pretty badly. And I think that, some of those gains the Trump campaign had been experiencing evaporated when Joe Biden walked out the door. And I think he probably sold most of the rest of them today.
Rick.
Although, just to come full circle about what we were talking about earlier, this gets to the Trump campaign is relying, and to some degree the entire Republican ticket, is relying on enthusing voters who came out for Trump before and making sure they come out one more time, at least one more time, whereas the Democratic ticket and the Harris campaign, it has some room for growth, and they have to capitalize on that. And that's the period that we're in right now.
I think that's right, but the problem for Trump is the election he won in 2016, he had the great benefit of running against a member of one of the greasiest political families in modern American history.
Ow.
And he doesn't have that benefit this time.
Wait, who is that? Can't you say the name?
Oh yeah, everybody remembers Bill and Hillary fondly, right? The Americans love them.
Based on what Rick said, I think it's important to pay attention to this. The pollsters are always talking about independent voters, and that's not wrong. In the most recent poll in the Detroit News by Michigan pollster Richard Shuby, he talked about how a lot of independent voters, 10%, I think, were going for Kennedy, which to me is just freaking bonkers.
9.7% right now.
And then even within his 10%, a third were split between leaning toward him for real, voting for Trump, and voting for Harris. But nonetheless, what the Trump campaign believes it has to do, and all you have to do is listen to them, they're out there saying it. They, like Rick said, Trump turns out people who are called low propensity voters in the GOP circles. They weren't registered to vote, they're registered to vote, but they only rarely turned out. They're mad as hell, and they need to be motivated by somebody like Trump to show up. So they gave an example of last cycle's Pennsylvania Senate race. Everybody loves John Fetterman, he's a lot of fun. I wanted to wear shorts, right? My wife said not to do it. He ran against a fellow named Dr. Oz, our friendly talk show host, right?
There's just this for those at home, there was just this general there in the audience.
Real quick, Dr. Oz lost by about 250,000 votes. Despite having the Trump endorsement in the primary, there were 500,000 identified Trump voters in Pennsylvania that had voted when Trump was on the ballot previously that did not turn out when Dr. Oz was on the ballot. This is how the Trump campaign looks at this election. He's on the ballot. Biden was just so bad, unthinkably bad, that they're like, wait a minute, we can get Black and Hispanic voters? All right, let's do this. But Harris obviously throws a wrench and that works.
So we are going to open this up to questions to the audience in a little while. If you have questions about Trump and Harris and presidential politics here in Michigan.
State House races.
Or state house races. So this is what we're gonna do. We called this originally when we had this idea weeks and weeks before the crazy reality show writers just jumped the shark on this season of election 2024, that this was going to be a primary preview of state elections, because we have a primary coming up next Tuesday. And for the first time, we've had early voting. Can I just see some hands? How many people have already voted? Oh my goodness.
Wow.
For folks,
Why are you here?
well, you can spoil your ballot in Michigan, just
That
saying.
is true.
So for folks at home, what was that, like a third? More than a third.
At least
Almost
half.
half
That
of
was at
folks
least
early
half.
voted. But we're going to jump in. So let's talk about what really is the biggest marquee race, the only statewide race in the state this election cycle other than the presidential race, and that is that we have an open U.S. Senate seat. It's been a decade, 10 years since the last time that we had an open U.S. Senate seat, and one that really could make or break the makeup of the U.S. Senate. That was after longtime Senator Democratic Debbie Stabenow announced that she was retiring at the beginning of last year, that this was going to be her last cycle. So let's jump in first and talk a little bit about the Democrats who are running. There are two who would like to be the Democratic nominee come November. Adrian, let me toss it to you for the Dems.
Yeah, so Alyssa Slacken's going to be your Dem nominee for U.S. Senate.
There is a primary.
Well, I'm sorry,
We
what?
should acknowledge, though, there is a primary race there.
I mean, there is a primary race, and you can gauge how well her opponent is going to do by the fact that, number one, I had never heard of him until he announced he was running for this, and the thing he's supposed to have going for him is that he was on television. If you look at the ratings that the television show he was on polled, name ID is a problem, and money's also a problem for that campaign, which is how you buy name ID.
So the candidate's name is Hill Harper. How
That's
many
right.
folks know who Hill Harper is? There you go. Okay. Did you know him from The Good Doctor, though? Okay, we've got some hands. So Adrian,
No, they listen to NPR and they're educated about the issue.
These are people of taste and sophistication. Let's just be honest.
So okay, you're making this big, like, kind of nail in the sand that it is going to be Congresswoman Alyssa Slacken and not Hill Harper. Explain, though, why that is. Like, for someone who just landed on planet Earth, explain the dynamics between why you're able to say that.
So, a couple of things. Number one, Alyssa Slacken may as well have been grown in a laboratory to win elections. And she's a friend of mine. I say that with love in my heart.
This is her congressional district that we're in right now.
Well, coincidentally, she has been for multiple cycles in a row in one of the most competitive congressional races in the country.
In the country.
And has had tens of millions of dollars spent buying the very name ID that we're talking about, and not just in Greater Lansing, right? In various iterations of her congressional district, she's been in the Detroit media market, in the Flint media market, in the Lansing media market. And so she's gotten these tens of millions of dollars worth of exposure that are super, super valuable with people who vote in Michigan. Her opponent hasn't really had that benefit. And so, I mean, those are the two primary reasons why she's extraordinarily likely to win. Also, she lives in Michigan, which it's not 100% clear that her opponent does.
You're talking about in the general election, or no, you are talking about
Hill Harper
I am
has
talking
that.
about Hill Harper. We haven't gotten to the other
residency issue. Okay.
Yeah, we'll get there.
There's some residency issues in this U.S. Senate race.
Yeah. Yeah, she's going to win the nomination. And again, Alyssa Slacken's a friend of mine, and I'm going to be voting in the Republican primary, not because of the U.S. Senate race, but because my township supervisor's being challenged, and I know my friend Alyssa's going to win.
John,
Really-
Alyssa Slacken for the win?
The reason that Alyssa Slacken is there to win is because Debbie Stabenow decided she was too young to serve in the U.S. Senate.
I mean,
No, No, we didn't. Sorry.
Everybody in the Senate is like 110 years old. She's only 72. She was like, tip her hat. She's gonna actually go out and enjoy her life. She's like, I am out of here.
Yeah.
Open that seat, because U.S. Senate seats just do not open up very often.
Right.
Like you just said, it's been a decade.
Yeah.
And she was ruthless in the party in trying to clear the field. Not completely. We're still talking about a few others. But she got a lot of other major people that would have probably wanted to run. Maybe the Secretary of State, maybe the Lieutenant Governor, who knows? Because like we said, U.S. Senate seats are still cool. You only have to run every 6 years and you get to go on TV a lot. It's a nice gig, right? But Slacken, like Adrian said, to cut to the chase, she's excellent. She's an excellent candidate. She's a bonkers fundraiser. She's the natural person. We were already talking about her as the next, right? She kind of runs, at least rhetorically, in the Gretchen Whitmer kitchen table issue lane. Plus, she gets to do the foreign affairs stuff with credibility. She goes on Fox. She doesn't even just go on like on Zoom. She like goes in their studio and can talk CIA and that kind of catnip stuff to some Republican voters. Like, she's into those things, so she's doing well. I've also noticed that she has had to be ruthless because a lot of people started telling her, I'm not going to endorse you. Wayne County Executive Warren Evans refused to endorse her. Several leading either current or former black officials refused to endorse her. They went with Hill Harper, like, why don't we have an open primary and have a chance to have a black U.S. senator, right? And she was like, okay, fine, I admit, I'm a white lady from the suburbs. I just saw her in the news this morning saying, I've done 100 meetings in the city of Detroit. Every 10 days, they put out a list of 10 more endorsements they got. So she is actually being improved to do well in Detroit, in Wayne County, compared to what she would have been had she not had this challenge. So it's actually helping her.
She's an absolute workhorse, that's for sure. Rick, before we talk a little bit about the Republican candidates, this interesting note that a Democrat has not lost a U.S. Senate seat, right, or election since 1994. Is it simply that, like, Michigan voters like to send Democrats to the U.S. Senate from Michigan, or has some of it been lackluster candidates?
Well, I mean, the one Republican senator was Spencer Abraham, who Debbie Stabenow unseated, and I'm going to channel my inner Adrian here for
Oh,
a
Lord.
second. And what Spencer Abraham forgot was there is actually a responsibility to campaign and show up for your constituents, even in the interregnum within that 6 years, to do it. He got lucky once, and then he just dropped the ball. These are also elections. If you can drive turnout in Michigan, traditionally, historically, Democrats win. And certainly Debbie Stabenow had a knack for doing that as well. And you know what? She also had a little bit of that hunger that comes along with failure, because she ran for governor and lost. And so, and having that experience does drive a person. I mean, it either drives you out of politics or it drives you to improve.
Yeah. Okay, John Sellek, the Republicans who are running in this primary on Tuesday to run, if you're Adrian, against Alyssa Slacken.
Again, open U.S. Senate seat. There were several people in the race originally. The leading candidate the whole entire time has been Mike Rogers, the congressman who held the seat that Alyssa Slacken held. Adrian's had a joke that, do you want to tell it? They're essentially the same person in some ways.
Yeah, the way that I met my friend Alyssa was I was doing some sort of media appearance, much like this, and I referred to her as Mike Rogers in a skirt. I got a very angry phone call from her where I had to explain that I meant that as a compliment. I actually like Mike Rogers.
Do you all want me to read out Adrian's cell phone number for you all so you can all call him now too?
I love how you make a mistake and you explain it by repeating the mistake.
No, look, the way that Alyssa Slacken has run for office is very much in the footsteps of the old Mike Rogers, like pre-Trump, right? These sort of moderate national security. I'm going to position myself with the voters as being right down the middle, even though I clearly lean one way or the other. That is the Mike Rogers 1.0 model, and she followed it to a T to pretty great effect.
Short story there, just to expose myself, I have done some work on the side for on the Rogers side, not for his campaign directly. But it's because I support Mike Rogers. I voted for him a million times before. He's a good person. He's the right person for the GOP to have in the general election, and that's what they're going to have. The opposing candidate, Sandy Pensler, a self-made multi-millionaire who had been in the race and dropped $5 million, recently quit, backed out, realized he couldn't get any traction, and endorsed Rogers at a Trump rally and stood up there with everybody. The main opponent left there is Justin Amash, the former congressman from West Michigan, who's more like a libertarian, actually left the party
Well, he
for a while.
was a libertarian.
I'm not sure what he is, to be honest, but he hates Mike Rogers. So he is running against Mike Rogers still, but he doesn't have a chance either. So what we're going to get treated to here in Michigan is an actual general election in a U.S. Senate race with two powerhouse candidates that the entire national political universe is going to be funding, so you will not escape that election.
Sorry.
Well, Mike Rogers, when he was in Congress, had a security clearance as chair of the Intelligence Committee. You know, it's one of those things where you go into a room and you got to leave your phone and all your stuff, and you get the security briefings. I mean, it's sort of funny that they're going to have to talk about Michigan issues, but these are people with large national intelligence, national security profiles.
It's going to be a really interesting general election between whoever wins this race come Tuesday. Let's talk a little bit about some open toss-up seats. So we were talking about the millions and millions of dollars that are going to be spent in this general election because, again, this open U.S. Senate seat could really change the makeup or, for Democrats or Republicans in the U.S. Senate. But we have two, as of today, genuine toss-up congressional districts per Real Clear Politics. And that is the 7th congressional district, which is an open seat now because one, Alyssa Slacken, is running for the Senate. So we have an open seat now. We know who those two candidates basically are going to be. It's going to be Curtis Hertel, it's going to be Tom Barrett, who ran against Alyssa Slacken 2 years ago. So that one is going to kind of be what it's going to be. But let's talk about the 8th congressional, because this is an interesting dynamic here. This is Congressman Dan Kildee. How many folks know Dan Kildee? You've probably met Dan Kildee, right? Of the Kildee family. Decided to retire. He was one of nearly a dozen folks in DC who just kind of have had enough. And Kildee has been through a lot over the past few years. So he's stepping down, and we have what is really genuinely going to be an open race. Adrian, what are you watching in the 8th congressional district?
I mean, honestly, it was a little surprising that Kildee retired. And this is, come November, this is a district that is trending the wrong way for Democrats. Doesn't mean that they can't hold it. It'll be more difficult to hold this district without the last name Kildee on the ballot. And so that's sort of the challenge for Democrats, is to keep their grip on a district that has been trending away from the Democratic Party basically since 2015 and the escalator ride, right? Since Donald Trump sort of jumped into national politics with both feet. In the same way that the Trump brand is been poisonous for Republicans in general elections in Oakland County, it's been pretty useful in places like Bay County, in places like rural Genesee County, and that's part of the dynamic that's going on here. So the composition of the electorate, primary and general, for Democrats is changing really fast in this district.
John, what are you watching?
It's the part of the state where there are two Republicans sitting in state house seats in counties that Republicans had one going back to Ronald Reagan and before Trump. So Timmy Beeson, I have a hard time saying Timmy, that doesn't sound right.
It's not the right way to describe a grown man.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Timmy.
But he likes it. People like him. He won the election. He's very good at that. In Bay County and David Martin in Genesee County, holding these seats, that's giving you a good indicator of what Kildee was going through. I was actually surprised that Kildee left, because this is something he seemed like he was holding on to run for, trying to get his uncle out of the way for a long time. He was in Genesee politics for a long time. I've met him several times. He's a good guy. He's nice. The district's trending away from him, but he had the best chance of raising money and being well known and all those things, and he still walked. And overall, that's like a concern, another kind of like red flag, warning light for politics, that good people are just looking at this going, I'm just not going to do this anymore.
So, Rick, I want to hear that perspective from you because it's something I've been thinking a lot about. We started a conversation years ago. Well, Rick and I are always in this sort of like constant conversation about all the things. But when John Dingell, stepped aside, and John Conyers, right, and Dale Kildee, these were Carl Levin, Andy Levin, these sort of names, right, who had been in Michigan politics for decades and decades and decades. I think we did the math, and between all of them, it was like
Fred Upton.
So Fred Upton. So I'm curious your thoughts about to have folks like Dan Kildee and Debbie Stabenow and Fred Upton, the institutional knowledge that's going to be lost to the state of Michigan, and the seniority, which really just means the dollars, right?
And committee assignments. I
And-
mean, that's not a small thing, especially if you get onto like an appropriations subcommittee or something like that. And that you have people, and there are waves of this. It's just, I mean, it sort of has a different, that word again, vibe, this time around, is that all of the traveling back and forth to the district, the constant meeting with constituents, which are part of the job, and politicians like to say energize them, and they're extroverts. I'm sure they do draw some amount of energy out of it, but it's also grueling. I mean, this isn't a 5-day-a-week job. It's an 8-day-a-week job. And you're on planes, trains, and automobiles all the time. And sometimes you're not just back at home talking to constituents. Maybe you're over in other parts of the country working for other people that you're trying to help get elected. And so the rewards have to be there. And what we're hearing from a generation of politicians right now is the rewards aren't there right now with the demeanor in Congress, in DC, and in politics in general right now. That we don't really have a whole lot of happy warriors out there.
Well, that's really uplifting. How are folks feeling? We started the night going like, how's everybody doing? And everyone's like, great. Now we're like, oh, everything's really bad. So we're going to open it up to questions.
That said, there's a whole bunch of people running for that seat, and they're going to beat each other over the head and spend millions of dollars to replace Kildee.
They are. But what we know, right, about incumbency is once you sort of get your roots into that seat, it can be hard to unseat. Let's quickly talk about another incumbent who's facing a very interesting primary, and then I want to absolutely open it up to questions. And that
So be ready.
Yes.
Don't leave us waiting up here.
The 13th Congressional District, Detroit. Incumbent Shri Thanedar. How many people remember Shri Thanedar from running for governor in 2018? Yeah. So for those folks who may not remember, Shri Thanedar was in the Democratic primary running against Gretchen Whitmer, who, of course, I believe folks might remember, won. But so Shri then put multiple millions of dollars of his own to basically win a plurality of votes 2 years ago in the 13th Congressional District. He became a congressman, but he is now being primaried. And what we know about this district in Detroit is if you win the primary, you're basically the congressperson, because there isn't going to be a real tough race in November. So we have this really interesting primary right now. Mary Waters, a Detroit councilwoman, a former state rep in Michigan, is running against Shri. Do we have any sense what's going to happen come Tuesday in this race?
I mean, I expect Shri's going to win relatively easily. Councilwoman Waters doesn't have much in the way of money, again, to prosecute.
Organization.
Doesn't have much in the way of organization either.
She has Mike Duggan's endorsement, though.
I mean,
The
endorsements.
mayor of
Endorsements aren't-
Detroit.
But endorsements are an organization. You're not wrong. It's a big deal. But
Right.
endorsements are an organization.
And to the extent that endorsements have value to voters, you need to have money to tell the voters that you were endorsed by whoever it is this person is that they're supposed to care about. And she does not have that, and she doesn't have the organization and volunteers to go out and tell people face to face about that. I do think that Shri is extraordinarily vulnerable to a primary challenge, but not to this one. And partly because in addition to Mary not having the money, Shri does, and has shown himself to be perfectly willing to light literal millions of dollars on fire in order to achieve public office, there's no reason to think he won't do it again. He has been doing it.
To win a job for $178,000 a year.
Some
remember
people
one
just
time-
really want to be somebody.
A political consultant, was years and years and years ago, was talking about self-funding candidates, and he said that one of the pieces of advice that he gives to someone who's got a lot of money and would like to run to office, and says, okay, I just want you to imagine filling a car with $100 bills, stuffing it with $100 bills, and then pushing it to the edge of a cliff, lighting it on fire, and then pushing it over the cliff, and asking yourself, am I okay doing this? Because if you're okay doing that, then you are ready.
Then
to
you're
run
ready
a
to come park
self-funding
it at my
campaign for
house to
Congress.
run for office.
I
That's every political consultant's dream. Park that car at my office and let's go.
Adrian's like, throw me a beer, I'm in.
Sure. I think this is the first time the city of Detroit hasn't been represented by an African American in decades.
Nearly 70 years.
Right. So that's troubling for some of the leaders in Detroit. And in the last primary, there were 9 people, I believe, including Shri. So with his money and his personality, he's got a quirky personality. He eked his way through. I think this time a lot of leaders in the area thought if we could narrow this down to a one-on-one race, we'll knock him off. But they didn't end up with the candidate they wanted. They wanted former state senator Adam Allier, and he didn't make the ballot because we seem to have this trend of not being able to collect petition signatures in Michigan anymore. So he didn't make it, and the candidate they're left with doesn't have the resources. So it's going to tell us a lot because he, in a story this morning I saw in Cranes, said, hey, there's a white mayor in Detroit. Why can't I be a congressman?
Okay, we're gonna open it up to some questions. Suzanne, are you, okay, so Suzanne over here. Oh, we already have so many hands, this is so exciting. Oh, no, Lauren is doing, hi, Lauren. No, oh, Noah is doing it. Everyone has a microphone. Hi, Noah. Noah, will you just throw your hand up just for a second? So this is Noah, the amazing Noah, who's gonna be coming around to you while you ask questions. Here's the thing though, don't take the microphone from Noah.
It's Noah's.
Noah gets it. So we have a question first over here, and then we're going to go to Noah. Yeah. And will you say your name and where you're from? Just
No
so,
problem.
so folks at home.
Hi, I'm Constance Conklin, and I love Michigan Public Radio. I want to thank all 4 of you for being here.
Thank
Really
you, Constance.
matters.
Thank you for being here.
And the people on the outside of the table seem to reflect some of my values, and sometimes the 2 on the inside too. But
If we get to sometimes, we're feeling really
Sometimes.
good about ourselves.
sometimes, yeah.
John's wife is in the back. She agrees with that.
Okay, but we got to talk about something really important here. Trump ran against a woman, my Hillary Clinton. I love her,
Okay.
and I love Bill. But we haven't talked about Trump running against a woman again and his misogyny. Can you please address that and tell us what we're in for? Because I'm scared. Yeah,
Well, we've
I'm
heard,
scared.
we've already heard him talk about the vice president as the nominee, and well, I mean, what's the the litany of things? He questioned whether she's really black. We don't really know what she is. Tried to do a takedown on Democrats because she had never been actually elected, even though she's the vice president. She was part of the ticket. What am I forgetting here?
Oh, I don't know the fact that he can't pronounce her name.
Well, yeah, and it seems like it's almost intentional. And the whole, laughing Kamala thing that he keeps throwing out there. And actually, the Democrats, again, it's becoming, the new pivot is that this is going to be the election about weird.
Look, I mean, the fact is, and as I guess the woman on stage, I'm going to take this question and not give a really thorough answer. America has not been ready for a female president in its 250 years. We just haven't. Michigan Public. Michigan Public is 76 years old, the organization that I work for. In January, on January 2nd, we just got our first female general manager. She happens to be in our audience, Wendy Turner. This is the first time I've got to work for a woman general manager. Progress takes time. And look, there's going to be misogyny, and there's certainly going to be racism in this country. It's what we know about this country. And and against childless cat ladies. So Constance, I think the question is, it exists. It exists, and you have an election now where folks who know it exists but feel like they have a power to do something are going to show up. And we'll see what that means come November, whenever we know who actually wins. It took a few days last week, right? Okay, Noah, you're next.
Sher Collins, Okemos, Michigan.
Hi, Sherry.
Hi. Could you comment on the lack of proposals on the ballot in November in Michigan and how unusual that is?
Isn't that just the most fascinating dynamic? When Rick and I started It's Just Politics 12 years ago, the year was 2012, and I remember it well. And we called it Ballot Palooza. Ballot Palooza, because there were 6 questions, and they were really big questions, and Republicans and Democrats didn't know how to message because you were supposed to vote for some, but not, so it was like, vote no on 1, but yes on 2 through 6, and also, but mark this. And the past 2 consecutive cycles, we've had really, really big ballot initiatives, right? Including Prop 3 2 years ago that enshrined reproductive rights into the state constitution. Got the most amount of signatures in the history of signatures in Michigan. And now this year, in a presidential election, Karl Rove is like crying because his whole thing was like, remember?
Use ballot proposals
That's
to drive
how
turnout.
one.
And by the way, it didn't start with Karl Rove. The Democrats used that to great effect for generations here in Michigan.
100%. So what do we make of this? It's absolutely fascinating. Adrian.
So some things have changed, and one of the things has been alluded to in a couple of different ways already, which is the signature problem. The price of poker has gone up substantially. Many of you will remember the 2022 gubernatorial election when there was a massive signature fraud scandal that afflicted a bunch of GOP candidates for governor. It afflicted a bunch of other people too that didn't get covered as much in the media. The big story was a bunch of GOP candidates for governor that were disqualified from the ballot because so many of their signatures were fraudulent. It's not surprising that the price of poker has gone up. If you're involved in any sort of business right now, if you've had to hire people in the last few years, the price of labor has gone up a lot. In 2022, a lot of these GOP campaigns were taken in by people who were promising them they could collect signatures at basically the same price that they always had, and that is a lie. If you want labor in this very, very tight labor market, you have to pay for it. And part of the reason that you don't see any ballot proposals this year is that no one has been willing to cough up $20 to $25 per valid signature.
Is that really how much it is right
Before
now?
you run verification on those signatures for ballot access. We used to tell people if you wanted to run a statewide ballot initiative, you needed a couple $1,000,000 to get it on the ballot. And depending on how controversial it was, you'd spend 12 to 15 million to actually pass it. Just plan on spending 5 to 8 million to get on the ballot, and a commensurate increase from there in the cost of actually passing something. So you have to care a lot, and you have to have really deep-pocketed funders to make that happen. The only exception, again, 2 years ago, was Prop 3, where they paid for some signatures, but virtually none of them, right? A very small percentage of them were collected in a paid fashion. The other exception to that was Voters Not Politicians, which got most of its signatures with volunteers. That's extraordinarily unusual because there are very, very few issues where you can motivate that many people to work for free. If you figure that out, I would love to know your secret. Again, I run a for-profit business doing politics for money, so if you have people that want to work for free, holla at your boy.
Historically, there is an organization in Michigan that has a history. You know where I'm going.
I do.
Right to Life.
Yep.
Right to Life of Michigan for decades and decades upon decades had volunteers who were trained and ready to get out and collect signatures, and they knew how to do it, and they knew how to do it so that their petition drives didn't fail. And every now and then, they would start a petition drive just to make sure that their cadre of volunteers still had their skills sharpened to do it.
Right,
For,
well-
for other things like candidate campaigns.
Well, and the other thing, they actually went to the ballot relatively few times, right to life. The biggest thing, the scam that they ran on a lot of their volunteers was that these signature campaigns were a way to ID voters as being pro-life voters, and they were a way to broaden the scam to Republican candidates, right? Because if you're running in a Republican primary, you want the right to life endorsement. It's gold, right?
Because they have a get out the vote operation.
And they also have a list from that signature work of signatures that they never turned in that only they have access to. And so if you don't toe the line with what they want, you don't get access to their lists.
That was a great question. Thank you for that. Yeah, Suzanne. Hi.
Jamie Wegrin-Jones from Diamonddale.
Hi, Jamie.
Rick, you had mentioned that being a U.S. Congressperson is grueling work and that a lot of people are leaving it because it's no longer rewarding. Could you please give an example of what that looks like? What are the rewards of being a congressperson?
Well, I mean, first of all, if you've got policy goals that maybe you were, recruited by a particular constituency or set of constituencies to go and try and accomplish some stuff, and so there's the, just the satisfaction of adopting particular bills. Look, right now, if you're a Democrat in Congress or here in Michigan, you're having a great run of policy victories that your fellow Democrats have been working for probably a couple of generations to succeed. And so it's just like any other work product, that if you have the capacity to create something that you care about and you're proud of, you're motivated to continue doing it. There's also the people that you're working with that both within your conference, the Democratic or the Republican conference, if you're a tight club and you look out for each other and you enjoy each other's company, then that also deals with their satisfaction. I mean, it's sort of, not alchemy. It's a workplace like any other in many respects. And then, there's also just, I guess, the snuggies that come with it, that when you come back to your district, that you're going to your county, your county party meetings and your district party meetings, you're seeing people who you campaigned with, and a campaign is a grueling affair, and that you've gone through that and you've accomplished something. You've won a congressional seat, no small thing. If you don't like those people anymore, then that aspect of the job satisfaction isn't there either. If you're looking at the top of the ticket and seeing people that you don't like, and you've got to go back and talk to your district and your friends, these are ephemeral things, but they matter just like they would matter in any other work situation. It's a unique place in many respects, but a not so unique place in many respects as well.
Noah.
So my name is Jacob Russell. I'm actually a local candidate. I'm running for Ingham County Commissioner in District 6.
Hi, Jacob.
Hi. My question is, considering Vice President Kamala Harris's significant increase in funding over the last week and the resounding defeats of fascism in Europe, do you believe that the United States would benefit from a shorter political sprint rather than a year-long marathon and increase our average voters' political aptitude?
So, Rick and I obviously don't give opinions about these things, but I'm going to say one thing, which is that for a year I went to boarding school in England. And when I explained our political system and how long it took, they were like, I'm sorry, say what? And then when I explained that we have these things called primaries, where people in the same party run against each other, usually for longer then the general election, just clawing each other's eyeballs out. And then literally the day after the primary are on a stage together holding hands. And they're like, I'm sorry, what? It was a fascinating thing to explain American politics vis-a-vis both our election cycle and primaries. John?
I think it can cut in a million different ways. We were in Europe during both the UK's most recent election and in between the first and second round in France, and every single cab driver wanted to talk to us about politics, and there's no doubt that the cab drivers of Europe know a hell of a lot more about us than anybody even in this room knows about France or the UK.
Okay, just a second though, John. Jordan, John's wife is in the audience. Did John just continue to talk about politics with them?
Proud of you, John.
Just so people know, John's wife said that no, he actually listened more than he talked.
Well, I was stuck. They made me sit in the front seat of the cab while they were all in the back. I had no choice but, oh yes, very interesting. Please get me to the hotel alive. They had essentially what amounted to snap elections in both places. And in France, it almost screwed them over because there was a lot of hubris on the part of President Macron, and they gave away the first round to what would be like the MAGA party over there. And he essentially had to sacrifice tons of his own seats in Parliament to try to stop them, and then now be stuck post-Olympics trying to figure out which communist, green, or progressive party person he's going to put as prime minister, so it doesn't always go well. The thing that was fascinating to me and tells us about our standing in the world and how many people are watching us, I made the joke about the cab drivers, but it's not a joke, but also in the middle of the UK going through an election, I walked into any given, whatever their version of 7-Eleven was, all four of their newspapers had Joe Biden or Donald Trump on the cover, and they were about to pick a brand new prime minister of their own. So everyone is watching us very intently.
Yeah, I actually have pretty strong opinions about this.
Because you make money off of elections.
Well, actually, that too. But clearly never far from my mind. So here's the thing. You talk about the short political season in Europe. Political parties are much more significant to the political process in Europe in terms of which candidates are going to appear on the ballot. And their electoral rules are such that you are going to have more incentives for a lot more parties to be able to participate in government. There are positives and negatives to that. Under our electoral system, a shortened political season just functionally means increasing the subsidy that we all pay for the two major American political parties who are deeply, deeply unpopular, right? And that's functionally what it would be, is another subsidy for these two hated political parties that everyone kind of agrees sucks, but we're stuck with because of our electoral system. So I actually think it would be extraordinarily bad. Electoral politics is annoying, but the length of our political process is one of the few things that actually allows normies to participate in politics, as opposed to the weirdos who run for office, right?
He said
Your
weirdo.
present company
He said weirdo.
excluded.
There you go, I saw in the back. People are drinking. Rick, did you want to jump
One
in?
little thing on that I would add is I can't take credit for it. Somebody else was talking about how long can Harris's sugar high last. And the comment was, it's almost like Joe Biden called the snap election, killed himself.
Yeah.
And now the sugar high might be able to last 100 days to get to the end.
You keep saying sugar high. I'm really disappointed you haven't made a Hunter Biden joke. Come on, man, you're the Republican up here.
Rick.
You know, just this thought occurs to me, you know, from time to time, and obviously it's not going to change anything. We are basically a two-party system, but you know, people, you know, say, well, I think that government should be run more like a business. It should be more business-like. Well, government is a business, but two, that's basically what a parliamentary system is. It's a shareholder system where the shareholders come in, that they elect board members, and then the board members choose the person who's running the company. That's a parliamentary system.
Yes, absolutely. And speaking as someone who runs a business, you don't want government run like a business. That'd be bad.
Suzanne.
Barb O'Kelly from Okemos.
Hi, Barb.
Hi, Zoe. I know things are all up in the air now, but I wonder if you've seen anything in the trends, given that Michigan has both a large Arab American population and a large Jewish population, on how the Gaza debacle is influencing the top of the ticket in Michigan, which may trickle down to the bottom.
I can tell you that not only, oh, thank you, Lauren, not only are folks in Michigan wondering that exact same question, but folks nationally are trying to understand that too. Gretchen Whitmer likes to call Michigan the swingiest of swing states, right? And one of the things that we know from February, from the Michigan presidential primary, of course, is that some 100,000 folks in the Democratic primary alone basically voted against the policies that we saw from President Joe Biden. There's going to be 2 uncommitted delegates to the DNC next month, just from Michigan alone. I think it's 36 total nationwide, but don't quote me on that. Adrian, from sort of working in Democratic politics, I'm curious what you're hearing, what you're seeing vis-a-vis Gaza, and how it's really in many ways changed how we're talking about how voters feel within the Democratic Party here in Michigan.
You know, I do think that, I think that's a little overblown in the sense that overwhelmingly, Americans do not make electoral decisions based on foreign policy. It's true this year, it's been true for hundreds of years. There are very few exceptions in American history where voters were making choices for things like president based on foreign policy. There are some obvious ones where we've been directly involved in conflicts ourselves, but relatively few. There obviously are strong feelings around this issue. You know, we saw some of that reflected in the primary, although some of that I think was directly about the Gaza war, and some of it was more generally disaffection with the current occupants of the White House. But I think it would be a mistake to read too much into the influence that the Gaza war is going to have on the presidential election in general. And we also know this not just from history, but from public opinion polling, right? When you ask Americans what issues are most important to them in terms of making a decision about who they're going to vote for, the Gaza war is pretty far down the list.
We should be careful not to make too much of what's going on in the Middle East, but we should also be cautious about not making too little of it, because this isn't like a lot of, well, I'm just talking about this in terms of the practical politics of it, that because Adrian's absolutely right that people care about foreign policy and politics, but it's seldom a factor. And why it does seem to be a little bit different this time around is that this is affinity voting. That this isn't, you know, sort of people looking at the risk board and figuring out how they'd like to see things move, that people in Michigan and around the country, but definitely here in Michigan, have specific connections to the Middle East and what's going on there, that they have family in those places, or that they visited and spent time in those places. And that's a different connection than just people having a perspective on what direction they would like to see things take.
That's absolutely true. I guess part of my point is that that's a pretty small overall slice of the electorate. So there is a small slice of the electorate that cares very deeply and intensely about this. There's a much larger...
It's a significant slice in Southeast Detroit.
Sure, up to a point, but even of the total vote that's going to occur in Michigan, it's a pretty small fraction. There's a much larger portion of voters that have reasonably strong opinions about the issue in one direction or another, but it's not their top issue. And I think it's very important to recognize the relative size of those two groups as we're evaluating the potential electoral impact. Somebody can care a lot about the Gaza war, whether from pro-Palestine, pro-Israel, pro-whatever sort of stance, and not have it be their top issue, right? And I think that that's a much larger group than the group of folks who have deep personal connection to the region.
Another thing we should point out is that one of the things that the transition to Kamala Harris as the Democratic nominee has kind of turned the heat down on that for the moment. And so there's some space there for the Democratic ticket and the Harris campaign to figure out how they're going to navigate this. And they have said they plan to chart that she plans to chart her own course, not necessarily the one that tracks with what the Biden administration has done.
It's also politics, so it's clear that she's going to take a step to the left in finding a path to talk about suffering and that's going on in Gaza, and then she's likely to have a Jewish vice presidential nominee, and so she'll have covered all the bases and moved on.
So I think John Sellek just named that he thinks Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, is going to be the VP pick. What we know just today is that Kamala Harris and her VP choice are going to be in Detroit next Wednesday, the day after the primary. And it's going to be really interesting to hear how she talks about the issue and to see who's there meeting her on stage.
So on that front, even though it seems the most reasonable that she would pick Shapiro, but we really don't know every detail.
Yeah.
There's been a groundswell for the Minnesota governor right now because he is a rah-rah football coach at halftime kind of speech giver, right? He presents a totally different viewpoint, or at least image of her. But I feel like I was the only person in the country world saying that she should pick Gretchen Whitmer. That politically, I think it is ready. Go ahead, let's go.
It's also not happening.
Correct.
I think we have exploded so many political myths that having two women on the ticket, yes, that would be historical considering we haven't had one female president yet. It's still something they can do. I think Gretchen Whitmer has turned out to be a supremely talented politician. She actually, on this book tour, has, I think, unleashed her personality, and she's hilarious. And somebody asked her, what do you think people didn't know about you before you went on this tour? She goes, I'm really funny. Well, she has been really funny. Right? People actually like her.
How many folks have read the book? Okay, about a tenth maybe in the room, yeah.
And she's probably the only VP candidate that, on the surface politically, would bring things from outside their home state. Josh Shapiro can't quite do that yet. Walz can't do that yet. Even Mayor Pete.
So, well, let's just ask, let's do the round table. Who do you think is going to be the pick? John?
The reasonable pick seems to be Shapiro.
Adrian?
Yeah, it's going to be Shapiro.
Zoe?
You know I don't play this game.
Zoe?
Who's got the next question?
You do too.
No, as the
Zoe?
co-host, I get to just move on. Look, we know it's going to be a white guy. It's either going to be Mark Kelly from Arizona, it's going to be Andy Beshear from Kentucky, it's going to be Josh Shapiro from Pennsylvania, or it's going to be Tim Walz from Minnesota, right? Okay.
I think Kelly.
You think Kelly? Okay. He's an astronaut. Noah.
My name is Don from Ceresco.
Hi, Don.
Ranked choice voting in Alaska saved us from another round of Sarah Palin. Is there any chance for ranked choice voting in Michigan?
Nope.
Next question.
Sorry.
Would you like to quickly elaborate, Rick? And I'm also noticing time. We've just got a few more questions. So actually, lightning round. Do you want to answer why, though?
What?
Do you want to answer why we're not going to see ranked choice voting?
It's just too big of a culture change. That's it.
Also, the millions of dollars for the constitutional amendment.
Right. Goes back to Adrian.
And it's not that, as we've talked about, we do politics for money. There's been multiple rich people showing up with their pet C4s in Michigan looking for consultants to help them run a campaign to implement that system, but they've not gotten anywhere because it can't get past the initial threshold of people going, what is that?
Wait, have you been asked?
Everybody's been asked.
Yes, everyone has been
Well,
asked.
I haven't been asked.
You're not a consultant.
I know. Touche.
You're not going to be asked.
Zoe's
until-
officially hanging
Wait,
out her
have you been
shingle
asked?
tonight.
I was going to say, you've got your first client. Okay, who are we going to next? Suzanne.
Hi, I'm Virginia Chambers. I live on the east side of Lansing.
Hi, Virginia.
Hello. My question is about the state house.
Yes.
Everyone is up for re-election or
Everybody.
losing. And a lot of the Detroit area districts have been redistricted. Lots of Dems in districts that cross Woodward will no longer be crossing Woodward. Could you talk a little bit about what you see for either their primaries or in November for the state legislature?
Yes, Virginia, thank you for bringing that up. I was holding off a little bit just because I think we're doing another Issues and Ale next month. And so after the primary, I super wanted to focus on all things State House, where, as Virginia astutely notes, the entire State House is up for election. And it's a big deal because 2 years ago, for the first time in 40 years, Democrats won the State House, Democrats won the State Senate, and the governorship. But let's quickly touch on the State House. It's an interesting dynamic now. I think it's fair to say a lot of things have changed now that Joe Biden is not at the top of the ticket. Rick, you look like you want to jump in first.
Oh, I was just going to say, and just remember, we're talking about, 2-vote majority.
This is what I'm saying. Right,
It's-
exactly. I mean,
this-
it is super close in Virginia. I don't know that we're going to know even after the primary right away. What we do know that's really interesting is House Republicans have actually, so has everyone sort of been paying attention to this, just like the chaos that was the Michigan Republican Party? Yeah. Then
I think they indicated they just didn't watch it, they enjoyed it.
They're like, where's the popcorn? So the long story short is, it was chaos. And then former Republican congressman and former ambassador to the Netherlands, Pete Hoekstra, got the Trump endorsement to basically take over the Republican Party. He is trying to get things back in shape, back in business after some chaos, as I aforementioned noted.
Get the building back. the bank
Like
account.
actually have a location that isn't a P.O. box for people to send money. Before he did, though, one Rick Snyder, whose name you might remember, actually was like, throw me in, coach, and is helping to raise House Republican funding for the House Republicans to take back the House.
And the House Republicans raised the most money. They raised $2 million alone in the last quarter.
Exactly. So it's going to be a fascinating thing to watch, and it'll be really interesting if Gretchen Whitmer, in her final 2 years in office, she has gone from having Republican control to all Democratic control, and what it will mean to have Democratic control in the Senate, right? Because the state Senate isn't up for election, because they only every 4 years, and what that would mean, and what it would mean to have a Speaker Matt Hall.
But this is true in both parties, just like in Congress, that the caucuses have to recruit and those candidates have to win. They have to have candidates who can win in November. And the Republicans have an extremity problem in some of their districts.
Yeah.
Yeah, one thing specifically to your question about districts crossing Woodward.
Oh, yeah.
So, as some of you may recall, and I'm not here to gloat, I've been calling what the Redistricting Commission did an unconstitutional racial gerrymander since they did it, and the federal courts agreed with me. And so one of the things that you're going to see post-primary in these Southeast Michigan districts that were redrawn under a court order is that representation in Southeast Michigan is going to get a little bit blacker. Not a lot, but a little bit. And you'll see that effect continue over time based on how these districts were drawn. The original House districts that were drawn in what are largely safe Democratic seats in Southeast Michigan were drawn from the city of Detroit into some of the original white flight communities, right? So in the 60s and 70s, when white folks started moving out of Detroit, they moved to communities like Warren, right? And you had multiple state house districts that were coming up out of the city of Detroit into these southern Macomb County and southern Oakland County communities. And by and large, in both the House and the Senate, those districts, those safe Democratic districts, ended up being won by white candidates from outside of Wayne County. And you're going to see that start to diminish over time as the majority and minority representation that was somewhat gutted by the redistricting commission in the first go-round is addressed by these new maps. Coincidentally, the federal court just approved the redrawn
Friday.
Michigan Senate maps on Friday, and so 2 years from now, you're going to see a similar dynamic play out in Southeast Michigan, and you're also going to see one, maybe two slightly more competitive seats between the parties because Senate seats are so much bigger.
Thank you, Adrian. And Virginia, I know that you're from the east side of Lansing, you said, but I hope you come to our next Issues and Ale when we're going to dig into all things that as well. Okay, I think we have time for one more. Okay, we've got two more. Oh, Noah, final question. So make it really good. Don't
No pressure.
disappoint us. No pressure. We're ready.
Okay, so I'm Dylan.
Hi, Dylan.
I'm from Goodrich, which is kind of around the
Yeah.
point. I'm here with my mom and dad.
Oh, hi, Mom and Dad.
Yeah. They didn't expect me to ask a question, but something you guys brought up earlier that has been like a huge debate between my mom and I the last several years has just been...
Thanks for bringing your family.
He's bringing the heat. I love this.
Do you have some laundry you want to put out to dry? It's a hot day.
Do you have a place to sleep tonight?
It's you guys were talking earlier about like giving a platform to someone like Donald Trump, and like the way that we help defeat him is by continuing to like showcase the sort of vile stuff that he's saying. And I fundamentally disagree with that. I think, you know, we shouldn't give these people any sort of platform. The less relevant they are, the better. And that's something that I've believed for a long time. And I know my mom disagrees with that pretty heavily, but what do you guys, where do you guys kind of fall?
Listen to your mother. One man's opinion, but your mom's right.
The bottom line is there's nothing new that you're going to learn about Donald Trump. Like, you can let go of that one. Like, everybody knows, so let him keep talking. He was beating Joe Biden by a lot. We have to remember, we go back 2 weeks, we joked about like the release of depression that the Democrats are doing through $200 million of Kamala Harris and all these rallies being popped up and Megan Thee Stallion showing up in Philly and all that stuff. The idea that people didn't know who Donald Trump is false. Like, he's the most known dude that's out there, right? There's nothing else he can say. In fact, it's so boring for the media and a lot of the Dems that they're spending all their time attacking the one guy we haven't talked about, J.D. Vance.
I think that
We can't talk about that on the airwaves.
weird
No,
election.
I don't think we heard someone yell cat lady. We heard someone yell crazy cat lady, but I don't think we've actually
You're right.
mentioned J.D. Vance. What?
I'm not going to talk about the couches.
I was going to say, all right, well, there you go. I had one all corked up, but John beat me to it.
Dylan, is that really
Good night,
how
everybody.
we're ending
Thank
the
you.
evening? Oh my God. Okay, this is what we're gonna do. For those folks at home, we're gonna sign off and we're gonna say thank you. But I wanna make a very important scheduling note, which is, how would you like to go to Hawaii with April Bear? I know, right? Okay. You might have heard we are doing Michigan public trips. Rick and I got to go to London with 44 of you in December. It was so much fun. And April Bear in February. So it's not just April Bear, it's Hawaii, and it's in February, going for 9 days, I think. But if you're interested, there is an info session tomorrow night at 7 p.m. You can sign up at michiganpublic.org/events. And again, while you're there, you'll get a little pop-up to sign up for the It's Just Politics newsletter. Rick and I are going to hang out for a little while because we both have this much left in our beverages, and we'll take any questions that you might have. My guess is we can have John and Adrian stick around too. But that is the official end of the evening for tonight. Adrian, John, Rick Pluta,
Zoe!
me.
Zoe.
Thank you so much.
Thanks very much.
What an absolute delight. And we'll let you know about the next It's Just Politics issue and ales that are going to be happening through November. Thank you, everyone.